This is a story about living and working on board the Russian space station called Mir. It was built when Russia was still a communist state and was expected to survive in space for no more than 5 years. It's lasted much, much longer, but by 1997 it was beginning to show its age. In February, there was a fire on board the space station. Then in June, an unmanned Progress space transporter collided with Mir, seriously damaging some solar panels which make electricity. It also punched a hole in the side of part of the space station, and this had to be sealed off so all the air didn't escape. By the end of the summer of 1997, Mir was having many other problems, and everyone was beginning to accept that it could not last forever. Before these problems began, an astronaut of the European Space Agency, Thomas Reiter, spent 179 days on Mir, starting in October 1995. This is Thomas Reiter's story, Riding High in Space.
My name is Thomas Reiter. I'm a cosmonaut of the European Space Agency. I had the chance to complete a half-year-long mission to the space station Mir. Once we were in orbit, it took us 2 days to maneuver with this little spacecraft, Soyuz it is called, to the station. It's very tight inside, only 1.5 cubic meters, and you have to squeeze yourself into this little capsule, but you have to stay only for 2.5 days. I was sleeping in the Spectre module. For this I attached my sleeping bag to the floor with a couple of elastic straps so that I could not float away and in the next morning wake up in a completely different place in the station. Hello, welcome to my little living room in the module Spectre. I would like to show you a little bit how the different things are located here and what I'm usually doing here. You can see below me, this is my sleeping bag. This is the place where I usually spend the night. On this side you can see some of my personal belongings, music player, some photos of the family. Here you can see our mission storage bag. It's quite helpful to fix all the different things which are usually floating around. Here to the left you can see the crew computer, which is fixed to one of these rubber straps with some Velcro, so I can work on it, holding my feet, one of these handles, and type like that. It's quite convenient. On this side you can see the documentation which is needed all the time. My sport shoes, the famous D15 folder. Everything is stored to the walls, to the ceiling, to the bottom.
Mir has a main core and 5 other modules attached to it. Kvant 1 and 2, Kristall, Spectre and Priroda. Up to 6 cosmonauts can live on the space station.
Of course, if you close your eyes, you don't know where up and down is, you don't know where the Earth is, and it just doesn't matter if you are working on the ceiling, on the floor, on the sidewalls, it's all the same.
I'm married. I have a little son. He's 5 years old now. His name is Daniel. We all had some photographs of our families on a laptop, and that was a little surprise for us. We didn't know that before.
Okay, now it's music time. Rock and heavy metal.
In zero gravity, you don't use your muscles as you do on ground. And as a consequence, you are losing slowly body mass. You have to counteract this with a lot of sports. We did 2 hours per day. Of course, it's not so easy to make physical exercise on board the MIR station. You have a treadmill, in fact 2 treadmills and 1 ergometer, and I must admit you have to force yourself.
Just run 3 kilometers in the station system, of course, and was working on the velo ergometer with the hands. I think that's enough for today.
The astronauts need power and water to live. Electricity is produced by solar cells that are kept pointed towards the sun. Some water is brought up to Mir by space transporters. The rest is made by recycling urine. The water is stored in tanks on the space station. But the astronauts also have to eat.
The variety of meals is of course not very high, and it's true that after a couple of weeks it becomes a little bit monotonous. There are basically 2 different types of food. We have dehydrated food, so this is completely without water. It's in little plastic bags. You cut them open with scissors, put some water in, cold or warm, depending on what kind of meal it is. Then you leave it for a couple of minutes, and then you just can eat it with a spoon or just sip it out. We had a special canned fish in jelly, which no one of us really liked a lot, so we just put into a bag and then put it into the Progress, and it burned in the atmosphere. If there is a drop just floating around, you can fly behind it and try to catch it, but of course nothing drips down on the ground. Of course, if you imagine you would cut the hair in zero gravity, it would just float around and it would be a big mess. And of course there is also a very dangerous aspect, because imagine you are asleep and something is floating by and you would inhale it, so you could actually suffocate. And to avoid this situation, we used vacuum cleaner, of course, during our haircut sessions. The speed of the MIR station is 7.6 kilometers per second, which is approximately 27,000 kilometers per hour. One orbit takes 90 minutes, which is, well, 1.5 hours, so you go 16 times a day around the Earth, and for every orbit you see one sunrise and one sunset. It was marvelous to sleep in zero gravity. The body is very relaxed. You don't feel any pressure on your back or on your side, and it's very enjoyable. I slept very deep. And there is another effect which takes place just before you fall asleep. When you have closed your eyes, when it's dark in the module, you see the effects of the cosmic radiation, which produces little flashes in front of the eyes. And this is a very interesting thing. You start to count them, and then sometime you fall asleep. during these quiet moments, in the first month you were just enjoying to be up there. You were trying to catch some nice views of the Earth, and we had a guitar up there, and I was playing guitar, which is a great experience to float around in zero gravity and playing some blues or rock and roll. The reason why you feel zero gravity in orbit is that it is a kind of free falling. So even in Earth orbit, gravity is present. But due to the fact that the Mir station is moving around the Earth with a very high velocity, the effects of this gravity almost disappear and you feel zero gravity.
The main reason Thomas was on the space station was to do scientific research in weightlessness. This research is very important. For example, it can help sick people back on Earth. In space, the bones of astronauts become weak, and this is very similar to a disease called osteoporosis, which affects many elderly people.
The bone decalcification which astronauts experience in zero gravity is an effect which is almost identical to a disease here on ground called osteoporosis. The experiments we did helps to understand the process of this disease on ground, but also to develop countermeasures.
They also tried to make new metals in space with a miniature furnace called Titus.
Titus was a furnace, and we could heat it up to a maximum temperature of 1200 degrees centigrade. And we used this furnace to perform experiments in order to find new types of alloys and to understand the effects when alloys are building. So the way to find out how all these control systems, how our blood pressure is regulated, how our breathing exactly is regulated, you take away one important parameter, and that is gravity. This you do by going into space, and then you measure how the body, how the heart, how the lungs are reacting, and from this point then you can derive how these control systems are actually functioning. We had to install a couple of sensors on the outside of the Mir station, and for this purpose we had to put on special spacesuits and then just leave the station through a special airlock to work outside in free space. The spacesuit is almost like a little spaceship. Around you then you have vacuum. Inside the spacesuit, of course, there is a certain pressure, and every move you have to make with your arms, with your fingers, you have to overcome this pressure, so it is actually very high physical load. It's an incredible moment when you turn your back to the station and you just see the Earth in front of you. It's almost incomprehensible. It's a beautiful view, and you feel just great.
Typing letters, we copied it off the computer in the great writing book. When she was copying it into a book, I noticed that the writing was the right way around. When I did that, I showed it to Mr. Emma and I got a certificate with a gold star on it. My writing has been all right ever since, and I am very happy.
Now on 4, Eureka visits the space station Mir.
No life can survive here. Escape is impossible.
November 1995, 2 months after Thomas Reiter arrived on Mir, the US shuttle brought new visitors to the space station.
As you know, the shuttle is launched in Florida, and the transfer is done in a quite similar way like the Soyuz capsule. It is injected into orbit in an altitude close to 150 kilometers, and then within the next days it increases its orbital altitude, and then it performs the rendezvous maneuver with the Mir station. I just by chance looked out of the side window in the cabin of the board engineer, and I saw a very bright point on the horizon. And of course the intensity of this spot was too high for a star, so we took some binoculars, and we saw this was the shuttle. The Mir station is maneuvered in a special attitude, and the shuttle then docks from, well, I can say from below the station. It moves up towards the one of the modules of Mir, the Crystal module, and then touches or attaches to this module. It was a very interesting moment, especially after you've been up on the Mir station for 2.5 months already. You're really waiting for some visitors. It was a very beautiful moment. It went very smoothly, and in fact the docking was manually controlled by the commander of the American shuttle. It goes very slowly, centimeter by centimeter, and even though the mass of the shuttle is very high, we never felt an impact. We just saw that the shuttle attached to the station by observing the control lights, which showed that now the connection was completed.
Throughout the entire docking, the American and Canadian crew had a great view of the huge space station from the flight deck of the shuttle. Once everything was ready, they could then float from the shuttle through the airlock and into the Mir space station to begin their 3-day mission.
Of course, the shuttle only flies for a couple of days, and they have lockers to store all their equipment, so you recognize this big difference when you fly through the Mir station where all this equipment is stowed around you, and suddenly you come into this shuttle where everything is nicely stowed away, white paint, and it looks very tidy. The Mir station, which is already up there for 11 years, of course is very old, and one of the most critical resources in the Mir station is stowage room. So in these 11 years a lot of equipment has been delivered to the Mir station, and the only way to store it is basically to put it on the top of the panels, on the ceiling, on the floor. During this time there was a lot of payload exchanged. The shuttle supplied us with spare parts, with experimental hardware, and they picked up some of the results of the experiments which we had already performed on the EuroMIR 95 programs.
And they trimmed the lamp as the sun went down, and they looked at this wall, and they looked at the shower, and a night rabbit came to roll, ragged and brown, for her men must move, and women must weep, till Dad, you know, hope you wore off.
The world's first space station was called Salyut 1 and was launched by the Russians in 1971. By 1986, the first modules of MIR were being put together in orbit. In 1973, NASA launched the only space station the Americans ever built, Skylab. It carried many scientific experiments. One of these was an idea from an American schoolgirl. She wondered how a spider could spin a web in weightlessness, and so NASA sent a spider called Arabella into space. Arabella changed the design of her web, and years later this would become the basis for a new generation of tennis rackets. Today, the Americans, Russians, Europeans, Japanese, and Canadians are working together to build a new international space station to replace MIR.
Living on board such a space station, living in such a tight, confined area, is not really what I would call a walk in the park. You have to be very disciplined to perform your work, to perform all the experiments, to work together with the crew. Of course you are highly motivated, you are aware of the fact that you are doing all this work for the benefit of mankind at the end, and of course you have this beautiful view which helps you to motivate you all the time. We all know the deserts are a very hostile environment, but from 400 kilometers altitude they look incredibly beautiful. If you look at such magnificent buildings like the Suez Canal, first of all, the fact that you can see it with your bare eye from the orbit is already quite marvelous. In fact, I have to say, astronauts have reported to see the big wall in China with their bare eyes. I personally didn't see it, but these are buildings which are really amazing, because not only that they were done a long time ago, but the fact that now you are able to fly in space and you can see these buildings with your bare eye from an altitude of 400 kilometers. So if you are taking a look from an altitude of 400 kilometers to the channel, and you take a zoom, then you can actually see ships which are on their way and trading goods throughout the world. And I think there are also parallels to a space station. The space station also in future will be used mainly for scientific work, but it will also be once a kind of base for further exploration of space. And in this way there are a lot of similarities. The Amazon is a huge river, and you just can imagine how beautiful it must be, how much life, what nature actually has built in this area. The water in the Amazon looks well brown due to the soil which it's transporting from the inner of the country to the ocean. Of course, everybody knows in the meantime that we have to be very careful with our environment, but of course this is very far away sometimes, and from the places where we are living it's not always obvious what happens to the surface of our Earth, what happens to the atmosphere. From orbit it is quite amazing to observe thunderstorms. If you imagine here on ground, you just see probably 1 or 2 or 3 lightnings every once in a while, but from such an altitude you see how many lightnings at the same time are taking place, and how such an area where a thunderstorm is going on, how this is illuminated. It's true, from orbit you can see a couple of craters which were created by big meteors millions of years ago. It gives an impression how devastating such an event must be, and it also shows us how easily our life on Earth could be disrupted if just such a meteor would strike Earth nowadays. This was the only active volcano which we saw, and during our flight there was an eruption of this volcano. We had passes over it, but unfortunately the weather was very bad and it was under a cloud cover, so the first shots we could take was already a couple of weeks after this eruption had taken place. And again, from this altitude it just looks beautiful, but if you know that on ground it is, well, devastating.
At the end of February 1996, after 179 days in space, Thomas and his Russian colleagues prepared to return to Earth. To do this, they would put on special spacesuits and get into the small Soyuz capsule. This would separate from the space station and then begin a fiery re-entry into the atmosphere.
Initially it looks very beautiful. When the capsule is entering the atmosphere, you see through the windows the plasma shining, you see this fire getting brighter and brighter.
After 7 minutes, Soyuz opened its parachutes and bumped down into the frozen steppes of Kazakhstan in Central Asia.
Due to the fact that we had some crosswind, the capsule tipped over and we were actually heads down and waiting for the rescue team to open the hatch of the Soyuz capsule. I just cannot imagine that in this incredible, huge universe, that only we are the only intelligent beings. Especially if you are looking to the Milky Way, which you see in a just fantastic way compared to the Earth, you get the feeling there must be somebody else out there. We cannot be the only ones. The universe is just too big for it, that we would be the only ones.